to our council meeting tonight. Welcome councillors, staff and people in the gallery. Welcome. Start with the acknowledgement of country. I would like to acknowledge the Narungga people, the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to the other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are present today. And would we like to stand for the opening prayer? We ask for your blessing on this council. May we all work together to advance the well-being of our communities. Grant to each of us the wisdom to know what is right and the courage to do what is good for all. We ask this blessing. Amen. At this point, I'd like to hand over to our acting CEO, Ben. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. As you would be aware, sadly I had to accept the resignation of Mayor Darren Braun yesterday with immediate effect. Darren was first elected in 2014 as a councillor in the Innes Pension Vale ward. That was prior to becoming mayor in 2018. I extended my thanks and sincere gratitude to Darren in person yesterday afternoon for his immense contributions to the community, which he did during his time with council. We do know with Darren's commitment that he will continue to serve the community in multiple different capacities. We wish he and his family all the very best for what holds in the future. The Electoral Commission was notified today and will be advised on next steps from here.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. Before we continue with tonight's meeting, I would like to formally acknowledge and extend a very warm welcome to our newly elected councillor, Danny LaFrude. Welcome, Danny, who is attending for his first official council meeting this evening. Danny took his oath of office on Thursday, the 8th of May, 2025. On behalf of the council, I congratulate you on your successful election and thank you for your commitment and to serving your peninsula community. We look forward to working with you and benefiting from your contribution, insight and perspective around the state. Please know that we have the full support of you have the full support of the fellow councillors and council staff as you commence your journey into local government. Welcome once again, Danny, and we wish you all the very best in your role. Apologies, we have an apology from Councillor Johns, and Councillor Gray has made contact with us that she may be late this evening. Conflict of interest, do we have any tonight? Councillor Bittner?
Yes, I have a conflict of interest for item 27.3.
Thank you. Can you hand out the paperwork at the time? Thank you. Councillor Scott?
Yes, I have a conflict of interest for item 27.3.
That's the same one?
Same.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you. We have minutes from the previous meeting for confirmation. Would somebody like to move that they be accepted? Councillor Hoyle, second by Councillor Clerk. Are we all in favour? Thank you, carried. Motions on notice, 8.1. Councillor Scott. Big one.
Sorry, Deputy Mayor, you need to do each individual one.
Oh, beg your pardon. Sorry about that, folks. Now we have to go through the individual matters of the meeting. So we got the ordinary council meeting on the 9th of April 2025. Somebody like to do that? That was that one?
Yeah, correct.
Right. So the next one is the confidential.
Confidential council meeting.
Right. Somebody like to move that? Councillor Bittner, seconded by Councillor O'Connor. All in favour? Carried. And we have 27.1 Balgone Playground Project.
You don't need to do that.
Don't need to do that? That's because
That's all in the confidential ones.
right. I'm getting some advice here. You can see that I'm new to this role.
Okay. So we'll move to 27.2.
All right, move to 27.2.
We'll need a mover and a second of that.
Right, okay. Would somebody like to move the North Coast Road Stage 3B? Councillor O'Connell, seconded by Councillor Bittner. All those in favour? Carried. And the next one. 27.3, questions on notice received from Councillor Adam Meyer. Would somebody like to move that? Councillor Stott, seconded by Councillor Clerk. All those in favour? Carried. Right. So we go to motions on notice, Councillor Stott, you've got the floor.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. I probably prefer to stand, but I can't do that, you might hear me. Essentially, the recommendation sort of speaks for itself, but I'll just sort of reiterate the situation. So I provided some photographs there, and you would have seen an email today from Fraser Ellis, a local member of Parliament, who has also approached Minister Koutsantonis addressing the same issue, and he provided an aerial photograph which perhaps gives you a better perspective of what we're speaking about. And also we have a guest speaker this evening, Mr Colin Davey, who will also provide an overview of the situation and some drone photography, which is also gives you a little bit more perspective of the situation. So it's probably a shame that Mr Davey isn't speaking before this motion is put forward, because he could give you a great perspective. I don't know whether that's possible to allow Colin to speak beforehand. Would that be appropriate, seeing it relates to this motion?
I don't think it's any change from the meeting.
I understand we can do it. We just need the agreement of the chamber for that to occur, have permission from the council. So if we agreed as a council body to allow that to occur.
So is there any objection for Mr Davey coming earlier on the agenda? Does anybody have any objection?
No. Would you like to do that?
Sure.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Stott.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Could I request that my presentation be recorded in the minutes, please? Along with the photos I've provided.
Right, we need a resolution from council for that to happen.
Can we do that at the end of the presentation, just so we know what's going in there?
Oh,
Okay, the only reason for the realignment of the York Highway was to allow Rex Minerals to be able to mine. It's not to minimise the heavy traffic from Maitland, York Valley and Sandilands districts through to Pine Point and onto Port Giles. The relocation of the York Highway has underestimated heavy vehicle traffic used by grain, refrigeration services, supply trucks, buses, etc. Now, we've got a photo up here. Reading Road, which is now being used to get on from the Minlaton to Bonboy Road. Reading Road is being used to get onto the new relocated York Highway. Now this is unacceptable because it's 2 cars have to slow down to 20 k's to be able to pass, let alone trucks, road trains, etc. So unless something's done, we have an arterial road in the upper bush track. Many people I've spoken to agree that the old York Highway, shown up there in the green, should be used to come down what we call Hawke's Old Farmhouse and integrated with lead-on lanes and turning off lanes onto the York Highway. It's just better vision, more room to get on and off. The reason for that is because road trains, etc., only had to pass or get over the main York Highway. Now they have to merge on, so there's a need for merging lanes. Also, the T-junction down at the Vincent Highway should be a big round, flat roundabout, because low grade trains currently give way to two highways turning right to go to Port Giles. So under the new system, road trains, if they can get on there, will have to give way to the right and left for two highways at one time to be able to go to the right. Now, if it's a roundabout, it's simple, just give way to the right, like they have done at the head of the Gulf, where the turn-off is to Cadena and down Ardrossan. So I would urge council to ask the government to hand over that portion of the old York Highway and to demand they put in slip lanes in the old Hawke's House and a roundabout down at the T-junction for the safety of all concerned. I mean, traffic's going to increase, it's not going to increase, and we have harvest trucks at the same time as we have holiday makers that are in a hurry to get to their place. So I just think it's unworkable at the moment, and I urge the council to demand that this road be fixed, because Rex Minerals has to pay for this. It's nothing to do with the council, otherwise you're going to be lumbered for the cost of upgrading Reading Road, and it won't be very good. Thank you for your time.
Well done.
Does anybody have any questions? Councillor?
David, is that the picture you want in the minutes?
Yes, I think that's my
That's all
second.
that's all you want in the minutes?
Yes.
No questions?
Thank you. Through the Mayor, I've got a comment. I've been speaking to our Director, Andre, just prior to the meeting. Andre has mentioned that the configuration of putting in the slip lanes there from the old York Highway could be quite an expensive option for DIT, and therefore they might decide that that's not an option that they want to take up. So what we could do is also, as well as put that forward as a proposal, we could, as an alternative, we could suggest that there be negotiations, I think, that would still need to involve the state government, but to put pressure on Rex Minerals or MAC Metals, as they may be known now, to upgrade Reading Road to a fit-for-purpose road. When we say fit-for-purpose, they might decide that the previous Pine Point Road was an unsealed road and that was fit-for-purpose, so they might decide they're not going to seal it. But at the end of the day, at this present time, Reading Road certainly isn't fit for purpose, and as Colin has mentioned, we don't want council to have to foot the bill for any changes and more modifications to that road. That's just simply not fair. So I perhaps suggest when we get back to my motion that we could make an amendment there so that we've got, I guess, a little bit of scope and room to move and negotiating options with both the state government and Rex Minerals. Also, the intersection there on the top left of the screen there, that's not that intersection, yes, where the pointer is there, that's still hasn't been configured as it should be, and apparently Rex Minerals haven't even finalised the design there. They have some issues with native veg and a few other things. So I'm actually very surprised that they've gone ahead opening that section of road in the state that it is at the moment, because there's detour signs, there's big piles of rubble. It's certainly not an appropriate intersection at the moment for the traffic flow that's required. So I think there needs to be a sense of urgency to address that at the same time by Rex Minerals. But thank you, Colin, for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Alright, would somebody like to move a resolution that we accept that into the minutes?
I'm happy to move that.
Happy to move that? Would you like to second that? Councillor Murdoch, all those in favour? Thank you.
Tammy, did you want to continue with
You
your
move.
motion?
Yes, I can continue with that. So in the motion, the point 1 of the motion essentially sets out the problem that we have, which Reading Road is unsuitable for the high traffic flow, the two-way traffic for large vehicles, heavy vehicles such as feed doubles, road trains and the like. The point 2, I've indicated that council would support a route that includes the Old York Highway as an entry road to the New York Highway as a more suitable option. And this obviously would alleviate considerable cost to council to bring Reading Road up to a suitable standard. The third point was to write to the state government, Department of Transport and Infrastructure, to explain these concerns and call for urgent reconsideration to realign that entry road to the York Highway. As an additional point, we could add that we also council enter into negotiations, which I still think will involve state government, Rex Minerals and Mac Metals, as an alternative to upgrade Reading Road at their cost to a fit-for-purpose road, and I guess that maybe even adding a 5th point to ensure that the intersection at it's Pine Point Road, Reading Road and York Highway is brought up to standard.
Okay. I think we've pretty much got.
Sorry, that's a lot of words.
Councillor Fittner?
Can I help workshop this, because I wholeheartedly support the concept, and you've already raised the concerns I did have about suggesting by points 2 and 3 that we're suggesting we support something that, we haven't, I'm not qualified to say this road needs to be used versus that road. So rather than having point 2 and 3 and then 4 and 5,
Yes.
could point 2 be that council requests that we work together with state government and Mac Minerals to ensure a suitable road at no additional cost to council, or something like that, so that it's general enough, and that way we can take our time, get professional advice. We're not lending support to something that may not be the most feasible option, but at least that we want to work together to get the best solution, and that we don't want to bear the cost, because this was all done, outside of us. How that works, I don't know, but that's just a thought.
I'm certainly happy to simplify the motion instead of having 5 dot points. You have 2. I think there's only 2 options. You either use the Old York Highway and configure a slip lane or a roundabout or something there, or you upgrade Reading Road. It's one or the other. So I think that we can be quite specific about what option are you going to use, and we need to negotiate one of those options.
We can certainly, through you, Deputy Mayor, we can workshop those words now with you if you wish. I suppose just thinking about the motion, we want to allow as much opportunity for us to assess some alternate options to what we're currently exploring, not to suggest that any of those are the most appropriate one. I know that Andre, Andrew and myself and Dustin have been talking with Rex Minerals about the possibility of the upgrade of Reading Road as one of those solutions, as you pointed out, and Mr. Davey tonight, and others, you know, Fraser has as well in his communication that this is potentially, you know, a good solution going forward. The only thing that I know about that is that the old York Highway, and the councillors be aware with the communication that that's been handed back to council now. It wasn't under our care and control previously, it was a dip road. So that may have an effect on opening and closing of that potential road. So I just want to allow us as much flexibility into exploring those options as we possibly can. And maybe that is in the wording, we can do that tonight. I'll leave that with the council.
Councillor Benton.
Sorry, I'm asking all the questions through you, Deputy Mayor, if I may, of Director Confler. I guess in my head when all this was happening, assumed that Pine Point, the old Pine Point Road would just merge into the bit they're upgrading. Is that still an option? So that is running just north of where the word Reading is. So again, I don't know whether that might be a feasible option too, rather than be specific that we want to look at point A or point B. We just want to make it work for road trains and at no cost to council.
Director Confler, you've got anything to say on this matter?
So I've had a look at this, I've been to site, and I'm hearing what you say, Councillor Littner, but anything's doable. It comes down to the cost at the end of the day. I know people don't want to hear about cost, but ultimately that's what we've got to deliver. I've got to deliver something that's safe and something that's fit for purpose at the least possible cost. And I would suggest to you that that would probably be the most expensive scenario, because there's probably in the order of 5 to 10 metres of rise to connect into the existing highway, and that at that location where it joins in, it doesn't have great sight distance, whereas the existing location, where the red point is, and also down where the green location is, both of those have sufficient stopping sight distance that's required by the Australia standards for geometric design of roads. So look, either one of those could work, but it's just, it'll probably be a matter of cost at the end of the day.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Fern.
Do we need to be that prescriptive on the motion? Could we just identify the issue, write to Deputy, identify the issue and rest, and give directors room to come back to council with options with a bit more detail to ensure with a matter of urgency to make sure that we have explored all possible options?
What do you say, Councillor?
Look, I'm happy to do that. At the end of the day, it's just a matter of the state government and Rex Minerals or MAC Metals understanding that what they have there is unworkable, and so we need to find a workable solution, a road that's fit for purpose, and so it needs to be at their cost, and it needs to be addressed as soon as possible, because they've opened the road and it's not in an acceptable condition at the moment. So I'm certainly open to making the motion a bit broader so that we can explore the best option to put forward to them.
Right, well, as CEO has put some words together, let's see if that suits the occasion tonight.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you, just looking at those alternatives and simplifying into 2 bullet points, so the one stays as per your motion, Councillor Stoll. The second is a potential addendum to that would be that the Supports Council, MAC Metals / Rex and Department of Infrastructure and Transport to collaborate on a route that will to the entry of the New York Highway that is a more suitable option than is currently available, and will better accommodate the high flow and heavy traffic requirements that is at nil cost to council.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Miner?
can I suggest we name the Reading Road intersection the Old York Highway, from the Old York Highway Reading Road intersection to the New York Highway? And that way it gives the director and other staff as much flexibility in that situation. So I was going, supports an upgraded route that connects the Old York Highway and Reading Road intersection to the New York Highway. In consultation with all parties. Would that be suitable?
Yes, yeah, that would be suitable, and we also need to include the intersection that at the Old York Highway, Reading Road and Pine Point Road that hasn't been.
Because it's the Pine Point Road that's the traffic.
That's where the traffic flow is.
We can include that in
Yeah,
that, so,
include that in there. And I think we need to I would like to reiterate the sense of urgency around this, and to ensure that we state that it's fit for purpose, so not just to say it's suitable. I think we need to be quite firm about the fact that it can't be just a bit of a patch-up job. It has to be a road that is absolutely fit for purpose for road trains, B doubles and heavy traffic, tourist traffic, etc.
Okay.
with the addition of the word expeditiously in that, in those words that I just mentioned in Councillor Meyer, would that be suitable?
Yes.
So you move that motion with those words?
Yes, could I perhaps confer with our speaker, Mr. Davey, just to see if he's happy with that motion?
Absolutely. You can come up here and speak
Would you
again.
like to speak to that, Colin?
Yeah, that sounds fine. Did I hear correctly that state government's handed that old part of the Benjamin Road back to council?
Yes, I believe that. I wasn't
Therefore, I
aware
would
of
have thought cheapest way and the best way is to make it come in on those green lines. And it's the safest way, because actually, if you're coming back from the silos and you're turning right to go down Reading Road, there's going to be a bank up of traffic, and they can't see that far. All the holiday makers have been coming at 105 k's an hour. So, to me, there's only one solution that's cheapest for everyone, and it's the best. But yeah, I understand you need to streamline it, and yeah, I'm happy with my way.
So we've got your motion, so you're moving that motion.
yes, I'll move that motion.
You're seconding
Yes.
those in favour? Carried. Thank you. I congratulate everybody I congratulate everybody on the discussion on this matter. It's obviously a topical matter, and sometimes we brush over motions and etc. But I think this was a worthwhile discussion. So congratulations, everybody. So we move on now to the Mayor's monthly report. Beg your pardon. Questions on notice, there are nil. Questions without notice, there are nil. Petitions nil. So move on to 12.1, which is the Mayor's monthly report. Everybody read that. Would somebody like to move that report? Councillor Bittner, second by Councillor Hoyle. Those in favour? Carried. Councillor's report is nil. And we move down to the information agenda. It's quite extensive. Does anybody want to pull anything out of the council information agenda? Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to ask a question. We got the notification number 16.1 in relation to any successful election. I had someone say to me that council elsewhere had an election cost $55,000, and I was just wondering what the cost was to council for the electoral commission to hold the election for us.
I can't answer that question personally.
I can take that on notice and get back to you with the exact cost, but I wasn't that much.
Just a ballpark, I heard it was 15, 20.
Yeah,
I didn't know.
I heard considerably less than that.
Yeah. Okay, that's all.
Well, we're hoping.
No, thank you very much. That's all I asked.
Right. Anybody else like to take anything out of the information agenda? No? Okay. Go then to, yep. We need somebody to move the information agenda. Councillor Earl, seconded by Councillor Meyer. Those in favour? Carried. Okay, so the mayor report, Neil, Bigman, Chief Executive Officer, can we move down to 22.1, our long-term financial plan annual review. I'd like to welcome Daniel to address the council on this matter. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, brothers. Just to bring before you the long-term financial plan that's come back after public consultation. There's a recommendation there to receive and consider the written submissions, 2 written submissions during public consultation, and then to adopt the revised long-term financial plan. Just to give a bit of process behind the development of the long-term financial plan that for the members in the gallery and for the elected members too. It's developed internally by Council's Financial Services team with input and review from Council's C&T. We've undertaken a conservative approach, seeking to make effective and productive use of income received or generated by Council to further the goals of the Strategic Asset Management Plan and address the requirements for asset renewal based on the Strategic Asset Management Plan for the benefit of the community. This plan is reviewed by the Audit and Risk Committee, composition of which includes independent members engaged on a skills basis who have recommended it to Council for public consultation. It's been presented to Council elected members at information and briefing sessions and then again to Council for endorsement of public consultation, which brings us to where we are tonight. Council must have a long-term financial plan that lasts for a period of 10 years, must be consistent with its infrastructure asset management plan, or we call ours a strategic asset management plan. And it forms part of the suite of Council's strategic asset management plans, which include the strategic management plan and the strategic asset management plan. It must be reviewed on an annual basis. And that annual basis must have a CEO sustainability report in it. This plan updates the current LTFP, which was adopted in April 2024. That plan was based on financial statements for the year ended 3rd June 2023 and quarterly budget adjustment reviews from September 23. Those items occurred some 21 and 16 months ago, so well out of date. The old plan utilised projections from November 23 Reserve Bank of Australia economic outlook 16 months ago. It relates to the old strategic management plan. We've had a new plan adopted in October 24. It also relates to a time prior to Council adopting a strategic asset management plan covering all asset management classifications. The need to adopt the plan annually is one that's legislated, but one that makes good common sense. Since last adopting the plan, some of the major changes that have happened is that North Coast Road Stage 3 has changed from an unsealed road to a sealed road, impacting Council's finances in a different way. We've been notified of non-receipt of funding for Robert Street Mainland and had to reduce the scale of the project. We've removed Yorktown undergrounding of power for remodelling in a future plan. The Jetties renewal program has raised its head and there's still continuing negotiations. The legal asbestos cleanup has been on its way. The impact of the independent rate review has been felt and the change to rating for Council. And also we've had $35 million of asset revaluations. We have, the plan has been, and we've also had heavy vehicle access strategy adopted as well. Many changes can take place within 12 months, and they are just some of the big ones. In relation to the plan, we've had 2 submissions received, and you can see a summary of those submissions, responses to that submissions by Council staff in the report. I bring this plan before you and recommend it wholeheartedly and prepared to take questions if any of you have those.
Are there any questions or comments on this matter? Councillor Scott?
Thank you, through you, Acting Mayor. Daniel, I was just looking at, firstly, under the separate cover, we had a copy of the plan, which I assume was the one that went out to the public, and that was had a different label on it with plain English, and then that was 22 pages long, and then the one that we've got embedded in our agenda is 34 pages long. So I've sort of tried to go through and pick out, where we've got, additional information, but is there something that has made it quite so much longer?
The difference between the previous version of the plan is not there, but the plan is now required under the recent changes to legislation to release a copy of the plan that is a full plan and then a plain English version to assist readers, so to condense the information. So those plans are the one plan, the one version is a full plan, and then there's a plain English summary. It's taken a number of pages off, but it's still not a short document. The version that inside the plan that is there is listed the amendments to the plan that's happened during the public consultation period, and those two amendments are based on some of the discussions from development of the annual business plan and budget for next financial year. So that is the removal of the Yorktown undergrounding of power project, given that the scope of that project meant to be revisited and it was unaffordable in its present form. That is something that we remodel in future long-term financial plans. We get to do that every year, so that will be something we'll bring back to elected members. And the other timing adjustment is the clean-up of illegal asbestos dumping. So the original version of the plan that went out, it was hoped that the EPA would provide guidance to council staff to allow them to proceed to a tender to clean up the asbestos, and we would know what the figure is for the clean-up of the asbestos in this financial year. Once we go to tender, we currently have in our financials a contingent liability. It's a note in the financials. We know we've got a liability coming to clean up the asbestos, but we don't know the value. Once we go to tender, we know the value, and that liability should be reflected in our financials. Previous version of the long-term financial plan thought we would see that in this financial year. The EPA has not come back to us. We will not get out to tender before the end of the year and get a result. Therefore, that expenditure has been moved into next financial year. They're the two amendments to the plan. One's an affordability and one's a known change. And so to reflect the impact of that is the improvement to these reductions to operating expenditure, grant funding, capital renewal and new loans due to the removal of the Yorktown plaque, and there's a movement in timing of the illegal asbestos cleanup. So a slight improvement on the financial results given the Yorktown being moved out of the plan to be looked at later on.
Thank you. Just another question. On page 8 of the plan, there's inflation assumptions. So for the 25-26 year, next year, we've estimated inflation at 3% and our rate rise to align with that at 3%. The following year, the inflation's been estimated at 3.1, but then we've proposed a rate increase of 4.6%. Then ongoing, the inflation has been estimated at 2.5% for the next 8 years, and then the general rate rise has been estimated at 4%. So I just have raised a concern there that because there's a significant gap there between the estimated inflation rate and what we might propose for rating, whether that is palatable or not, and whether perhaps we estimated those figures on the basis that we're trying to. We obviously have debt levels that we need to address, but I'm not sure whether the rating levels will be palatable if we're looking at an inflation rate of 2.5% and our general rate rise is minimum of 4%.
happy to answer that question through the Mayor. So yes, this long-term financial plan has been, for this year, looking at a CPI type rate increase, but for future years, consistent with the existing plan of having an increase above CPI for those. Some of the reasons for that is, one is the loss of funding in supplementary local roads funding. So supplementary local roads funding provides about $405,000 a year to council to be used as a, as an untied grant. It helps assist us with our, road renewal and general expenditure overall. That's a loss in next financial year. A 1.5% rate rise on current figures is about $375,000. That does make up for that loss in funding. Recent correspondence from the Grants Commission is that grant is still ongoing. With the federal election, I don't believe that there was a promise that would be renewed, so we'll wait and see whether, everything new. We do have a chance to revisit this plan in a year's time. Also, this plan factors into loans around the asbestos cleanup, and so those loans are borne and repaid back over current years, adding to the ongoing operating expense of council. And so having a rate rise that reflects that. We'll note that the LTFP doesn't target any one land use category or anything. It's quite broad and agnostic to land use in a sense. But it is there. Without that 1.5%, which is consistent with increases above inflation in the current plan, there's a need to revisit things like renewal and new projects, but we do get the opportunity to do that next year as part of the LTFP. Tax is never palatable in my, it's not palatable to me personally, nor is it for our community, but it is the nature of, our business is that a lot of our services are delivered through infrastructure assets, and council holds, as at 30 June last year, over $500 million worth of assets that it needs to renew. That doesn't reflect marine and coastal assets, all of those, more of those will come on the books next year, nor does it reflect things that are not assets like jetties. So, with a significant roadwork and a significant asset base, the plan is suggesting more income is needed to address that.
And so I've just got one last question. Just on page 14, it's a question that arose through one of the respondents to the public consultation. There was an adjustment in the plan that $1.5 million indexed annually has been allocated in capital wages every year. So that wasn't on the original draft that went out to public consultation. I'm just wondering what examples of capital projects, so if they would be new projects, I'm assuming, that these wages would be allocated to.
Through the chair, through me. I would have to check to see whether it was actual amendment, because I don't believe it was, but as part of our practice, our staff spend time on operating projects, and where they spend time on operating projects, their wages are costed to an operating line. Where our staff spend time renewing roads, doing capital works, that their wages are allocated to capital works. So that's a current practice that's in all councils where they have crews that do capital works. So for the plan, we're effectively saying that $1.5 million of the wages budget is sitting in those capital asset renewal lines. It's not an increase. It's a rough figure that represents about what we're spending in regards to capital wages on our works. So that would be the works crews of Andre's department. Where they are renewing roads, their wages are sent to the cost of that road, reflecting the cost to reconstruct.
So is that, when you say capital projects, could that be renewal as well?
Yeah, definitely
Not
renewal,
just, not necessarily new.
No, the bulk of it would be renewal by our works crew, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I did have a question. I think Councillor Stock sort of touched on it a bit. Previously, I asked for a comparison of the last year, 5 years long-term financial plans for the rate increases and so forth, to identify. I think we need to work out why we're not breaking even. I've been in 10 years, and 10 years we're supposed to be breaking even, and we're still not breaking even, and it keeps going out. So I was hoping when I put in that request previously for that document that we get a bit of an understanding as to what's changing now. Bearing that in mind, that was the question I was going to ask you, is why we didn't get something that just as a basic comparison, I'm not a chartered accountant, but something that would make it a bit easier for me to understand. Is there a reason why we didn't get a copy of that, or get something like that?
We, through you, Mr. Mayor, in our current workshop, last workshop on the annual budget, we did have to do a little comparison of some of the things that are making an impact, particularly on the first year, and the large impacts on the first year, and this speaks to some of the public submissions, was the inclusion of operating projects such as the Jetties renewal program. So taking out the Jetties renewal program, taking out operating expenditure like an estimated $2 million to fix up our asbestos. Those things are hitting and providing the bulk of that loss, that deficit we're predicting for next year. If we were to take those projects out, we'd be much closer to break even for next year. But they're things that I assume the elected body want to continue with maintaining jetties in the area and keeping those as community assets, and that's why those projects are in. Or cleaning up illegal asbestos is something we can't afford. So in the first year of the plan, they are the projects that are really hitting the bottom line and making that large deficit. You know, on top of that, we do continue to have, I mentioned a $500 million asset base, that over $500 million asset base that needs to be renewed and it will be added to by the inclusion of a number of marine assets. So the costs for those are revalued on a regular basis. We saw the impacts last financial year of a $35 million increase to that written down value of assets. That impacts depreciation, increased depreciation, because the cost of things have gone up to renew. So that is part of the challenge as well, is looking at our asset base, how do we best address it, and how do we walk with our community, the tightrope between what we can renew and affordability, and what we need to do is always a challenge.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. If I can just maybe do a follow-up in relation to that, because I didn't have anything, I had a bit of a look today to see if I could find previous long-term financial plans, and I couldn't really see them readily on the website, so I went back to our email and typed in long-term financial plan, and went back, I think I got the 2021, which showed the 5 years, 2026, which would be the next year, I believe, because it's in whole years is the financial figures, that the expected general rate revenue increase is going to be 2.85%. I think 2027 was 2.9%, but as I think Councillor Stocks pointed out, next year we're looking at 4.6%, which is a fair whack more. I suppose, how do I justify that increase? I think there's more long-term issues in relation to how we're planning forward that we as a body need to discuss. So I think that's maybe something we need to come back and analyse a bit more. Bearing in mind, we're already adding at 1.5%, we did it previously, except for this financial year, I recognise. But previously it was the same thing, it was adding 1.5% onto the CPI, different economic times. How do we as an organisation look at ways we can reduce our expenses instead of looking at ways of increasing our income?
Good question. Those things aren't done, and there'll be some of the rest of items I could say on the confidential agenda, I can't say too much about them, but where procurement activities show that there are savings once we go to market on compared to budgets. And where those savings happen, we reflect those in the next available quarterly budget review. So we have a quarterly budget review going tonight. Now sometimes we hit for things that we haven't planned for, like treating green waste this year, and we've got an expense we didn't have. But sometimes we go and procure items, and I refer to some of the items in tonight's meeting, where we've set a budget for it, and then been able to realise savings once we've gone to market. Those things, it's challenging. And I did mention this, I think last time when you raised the question about the 5 years, is that council publicly plans through the long-term financial plan, which we set up before the annual business plan. Then we review our budgets through the 3 quarterly budget reviews, always adjusting. So, and then we've got the annual business plan that comes out, which is based on the long-term financial plan, but reflects things. Earlier when I started this, that why the question we asked, why haven't council achieved the outcomes of the plan? And that is sometimes due to decisions made outside the plan. It's due to changing circumstances. I read before, between last plan and this plan, I'll read it again. North Coast Road is now steel growth for stage 3. There's a different cost profile for that. There's different depreciation. We planned to get a grant, but we didn't receive it for Robert Street Maitland, that's a $9 million project. So those sort of things, this is why we update those plans annually. This is why organisations like ASCOSA recommend, one of their first recommendations is that council continues to update its plans. And so it is challenging. We're not dealing with a static situation, and we don't deal with static decisions. Sometimes the electric body will make decisions that aren't in the plan, and they need to be reflected in the next year. Sometimes things happen to us, like illegal asbestos dumping that we find. It's a challenging thing to do, but by that regular revisit and adoption, and making sure that we have the most up-to-date plan adopted as we can, allows us to plan best for the future.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Meyer. Councillor Bittner.
I'm happy to move the motion.
Thank you. And we have a seconder. Councillor O'Connell. All those in favour? Thank you. Against? Thank you. Thank you. All right, we'll move to 23.1. Landowners consent request for Vincent Portugal Playground shade structure. Do we have, Dan, would you like to speak to that?
So this report item was workshopped at the last information and briefing session. Port Vincent Progress have looking to proceed to development application for a new shade structure over the foreshore playground. There was talk in the report and also in the presentation about the results of their consultation with landowners broadly in the community, and then more specifically along the foreshore where views may be impacted. So this report is providing an option really to support or to not support the landowner consent for the construction of this shade sail. My understanding is that once this decision is made, Progress can proceed and confidently lodge their development application, and that won't trigger any further consultation. So a decision for the elected body to make there. Happy to take questions, and may refer those to others who work more specifically in this area.
Do we have any questions? Thank you, sir. Councillor Scott.
Thank you. Thanks, Acting Mayor. Not really a question, more a discussion point, I guess. So the Port Vincent Progress Association obviously presented to us at the last workshop. It was clear that they've done a lot of public consultation throughout the town, and generally the concept of having the shade sails is well supported. Obviously they've surveyed the people that are most impacted along the esplanade there, and there was an overwhelming opposition for the shade sails. But unfortunately, as I understand it, no one really has a right to a view, which is unfortunate for those people who purchased a property and expect that their view would be available to them for the lifetime of their property. But it's just one of those things that can't be guaranteed and they don't have a right to. I guess the more empathetic the Progress Association can be to, I guess, work with those people, the better. And I know that there was at least one respondent who indicated that the dual sale option was a more palatable option for them than the bigger, rounder, sort of more intrusive option. I guess I support the recommendation A, that we do allow them to move forward with the proposal, given that it is a project that the township has generally supported. One comment that I think was probably quite relevant just with regard to concerns was about the potential for the cormorants landing on the shade sail and making a mess of it, and that we know that there's a huge problem in Port Vincent and also Stansbury with cormorants, and so it is highly likely that it's going to be another resting point for these birds, and there's not a lot we can do about that. But I guess something for the Port Vincent Progress to consider would be that whatever material they use is something that can be cleaned, because even if it's a marine grade fabric, well then over time that might absorb excrement, who knows, and it might be sort of an unpleasant place to sit under. if it's not able to be cleaned readily. So that would be just something for them to consider, I think. But I don't think we can stop progress because of these birds. That would be fair to say, oh, we can't put up the structure in case a bird lands on it. But that's just my comment anyway with regard to that.
Would you like to move that,
Yes, I'm
recommendation?
happy to move
A.
recommendation A.
You'll second that, councillor Clerk. Are there any other questions on this matter?
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Through you, Mayor, I'd just like to understand the process from here. We would just give consent, but I understand that's still to go through a development implication for this. I'm a little bit concerned about the consultation. I don't believe there is wide community support or otherwise. 56 respondents to a survey to me isn't good in community support. Will there be opportunity in a development application for further community consultation and any objections to that development application moving forward?
Councillor and Director.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I can confirm our development manager has previously looked into this one around the time that it was presented to council and has confirmed that there wouldn't be public consultation or doesn't trigger public notification or consultation as part of the development assessment. So effectively it would be assessed against the planning criteria of the code and then the building code for the structural shelter itself. That would be effectively as far as the assessment would go with that.
Happy with that? Thank you. Right, we've got a recommendation. I'm going to leave it on. Got a recommendation A, moved by councillor Scott, and we have a second by councillor Clerk. Are those in favour? Carried. Next matter is 23.2, water allocation for council, community ovals and recreation facilities. We have a recommendation A and a recommendation B. Do we have any discussion on the matter? Beg your pardon? Daniel, beg your pardon, I didn't see the light.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. Just the report before you, there's obviously a few options. There's the two recommendations to support an increase or not to support an increase in water allocations. There's a table provided over on page 179 of your agenda, which has a few proposal options. Just to note that Council has been providing this assistance since 2000 community groups, year 2000, who use SA mains water to water ovals, community ovals. There's a bit of analysis there on the current provision of the current water allocations at close to $47,000 a year, and some speaking to the rationale that's there. It's worth noting, I suppose, that from 2011 to 2025, the things split out, I think, Sam, that report is the increase of 17% in the rate of water price over that time, but the annual water allocation hasn't changed. So there are a few options there and a few proposals. Happy to take questions and happy for the members to discuss options.
Questions, councillor Pittman?
Can I suggest we go informal for this, because I've got a proposal B, proposal E for you.
Is the, okay, we're moving to go into informal. Councillor Boyle, second councillor Scott. Councillor Pittman, beg your pardon. Pardon? Sorry? Oh, that's sorry, I was getting it. All those in favour? Thank you. All right, councillor Pittman.
If I may, thank you. I was leaning towards proposal B, which is the 15% increase, but can I suggest, I know there was talk about reviewing it going forward, but in the meantime, proposal be but indexed each year, so rather than having a flat rate, bang on about this all the time, movement and then a big jump. If we make a decision that it is just indexed to, you know, water costs or CPI rounded up to the nearest percent, or a set amount, whether it's 3, 4, 5% each year, so that we don't have to keep revisiting this when we're well behind on what we should be providing.
If you don't mind, Deputy Mayor, I can provide some further context to the report and had some input into it, and consultation with a couple of the community groups. This hasn't been reviewed for quite some time, and unfortunately, with the way that the weather is permitted, it hasn't really reared its head. But as we heard from the presentation last week, like it's been a very extremely dry year. I think we all are quite aware of that. Community groups are doing it quite tough through memberships, etc., and participation rates. And I think during these testing times, these hubs, community groups are terribly important. From a psychological perspective as well as participation for the kids. And as much as we can help out, I think it makes sense. There is, as you read in the report, it is considered to be reviewed annually, so that we can make that determination so that it doesn't get lost in indexation. The indexation may not need to happen.
But does it need to be reviewed annually if we throw in annual indexation? And you could convince me to go a higher percentage, because I agree that, yeah, especially on the dry years, a green space that someone can go to is important. But look, that's why I wanted to throw it out for a conversation. I'm happy to discuss it.
Yeah, and these are just recommendations from staff, so councillors wish to have another recommendation, that's fine. I do know, even just as early as yesterday, we had a further request, and I know that most of the expenses for water allocation have been exhausted and there's still got a water to pay. So, some more.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Councillor Bittner. I've got written in my notes, yes to increase and receive the increase. Basically the same sort of situation, so I think we can capture that. 15% increase, it's gone up 17% in the last 10 years. Seems like a valid case. And if we do our rating models based on CPI, so is there a way that we could capture that so it doesn't come back to the chamber for review by us for 5 years, and that it can be automatically approved up to CPI by the annual review by staff as a trigger to save a fair bit of work on an annual basis?
Could I suggest to enable us to incorporate it into the budget? Could we pick a March CPI date that allows us, if we get the June CPI, we don't, actually March seems quite late, but it'll help us to have the figure before we adopt the budget for the coming year. So the March Adelaide City CPI, I'd be happy with that.
CPI is great. This is specific to water. Is there a way we can capture water increases as a percentage annually, so that it's more reflective of the actual costs?
Very full now. That's all right. So, yeah, we could wait until.
Sorry.
We could adjust it, we could guess, which is what we have to do, because SA Water don't release their water price increases until, we don't know the rate until 1st of July. So there's always an estimate of what they're doing with their water bills, and we tend to track it around CPI, and they tend to, because they're regulated much more heavily by SCOSA than as a major water retailer. So we could do that
If it tracks roughly with CPI,
Tracks
that's
roughly,
fine.
yeah.
It was more just so that, we're not in this position again.
would give us some certainty to have something to nail the increase on.
So is there a vibe for 15% an index?
Are we really doing enough at 15%? If you look at the numbers, it's less than $5,000 to go to the 25% increase, spread over 14 homes. It's a pretty small contribution to the entire community. And as Director Thompson said, particularly in years like this, where people are under financial pressure, to have a green space where people can congregate, I think is very important. And for the sake of $5,000, I'd be happy to move.
remind us what the Maitland Golf Club required? Thought they put a number up for us to consider, and that might just give us an idea about what percentage would actually be helping them. I just can't recall exactly what it was.
This would be for the community oval, so the golf club is different.
Oh, sorry.
You're talking about the Cougars.
Did we get a request from the football club as well?
We did get a request from the football club, additionally with Edithburgh and one other which just escapes me now. I believe it was Minlaton. I don't have that particular number at hand.
So just, I guess, with the 25% increase, actually, that wouldn't cover their bill still. It's a subsidy. So I tend to agree with Councillor Hoyle that it's an extra $5,000 spread over those, and that number of townships I think would be, absolutely reasonable to do, especially under these circumstances with the ridiculously dry year that we've had.
Just before we go back to formal, looking at a way that we can capture this, and I suppose in the original recommendation would be recommendation A, and then you choose which particular option, and then we can include that for the period being 25-26 through to 29-30 or 30-31, you choose that period of time, 5-6 years, whatever that may be, that it's indexed at the March CPI annually, which to that effect, so we can include that in that recommendation if someone wants.
Is there any other discussion on this matter in formal? You happen to move back, into, thank you, Councillor Meyer, seconded by Councillor Bittner. Those in favour? Thank you. Okay, so, recommendation A, does somebody like to move?
Move recommendation A, model D, quoted B, 25% increase.
With the
Yeah,
With the inclusion of the CPI indexation as of March out to 29-30.
yeah.
Okay.
Councillor Bittner?
happy to second that.
Second that. With those new words, are we all in favour? All those in favour? Carried. Okay, so we go to 23.3. Community Energy Upgrades Fund Program, Solar and Battery Grant Opportunity. We have a recommendation in front of you. Would somebody like to move that? Councillor Clerk? Do we have a seconder? Councillor Hoyle? Is there any discussion on the matter? Councillor Meyer?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I believe that I recall when this came to us in round one of grant funding, we were quite happy to support applications for council buildings, but not to subsidise commercial interests. So looking at this situation, I'm just thinking, if we missed out on that grant in round one, because it was only going to be a council building that we'd authorised applying for the grant for, are there other options that would also see the community assets improved? And my thinking was this building, because of leisure options being based in this building, we would get that extra portion in the grant application to show that what we're doing is benefiting the community, it's benefiting a disability service and provider, and it's also keeping it within council. With that current motion as it currently stands, we'll be subsidising a commercial business for the installation cost of $11,000 and not getting any ongoing benefit for the rest of the ratepayers going forward. So my question through you, Mr Mayor, is that possible, instead of childcare centre, we could substitute it to another building that would benefit council and also benefit a community group along those lines? Thank you.
Through you, Mayor. Thanks for the questions, Councillor Meyer. Might throw to Nick in just a minute, but I do note that the recommendations in this report is from feedback that we got through the grant itself. It was an extremely competitive grant round initially. It was heavily oversubscribed, and one of the reasons for us not being successful is because we didn't have an inclusion of, community assets per se. The rationale with choosing the childcare centre, I think it's stated within the report. It's ongoing commercial activity through a supplementary operator, but that's not to say that those things might not change. The town hall, and again we do have a commercial operation with leisure options as well, but I suppose when you're assessing the two commercial operations, then one has a lease for I think it's 25 years, so it gives a sense of assurance that will be operating in the facility and will be used from essentially 6 o'clock in the morning when staff arrives to when they leave late in the evening. We had that experience with the power outage and the net effect on the childcare facility itself and the children per se. So it had a diminished effect within leisure options and the entity that we're running from here. But Nick, might just throw you in just for some further clarity on the feedback that we received.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, the feedback we received did mention that the project was a bit light on compared to some that they were getting in the first round, which a lot of them were metro based and they're building virtual power plants and things that are a bit beyond us at this stage. But the new guidelines have come out and they repeatedly mentioned childcare throughout. So that was one factor, and the other one was that we were contacted by KUs at the childcare centre who sort of asked if we could do something to try and give them minimal backup power in case of another blackout or other such emergency in the future. So for those two reasons, we went to CMT and suggested that we try to again include the childcare, give us the best chance of actually getting the overall grant, which of course most of the benefit will be from the maintenance office. And we then contacted the childcare operator who kindly agreed to put in 10k toward it. So that was the thinking behind it. But of course we can apply for anything of your choosing. We just thought that would give us the best chance of actually winning the grant this time around, and as well as helping out the childcare operator, which obviously provides a very important service for everyone going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Are we receiving any income from the childcare centre at the moment?
So there is, as you be aware, there is recognition of rent paid in advance, which we're drawing down on a monthly basis.
I understand the childcare centre is pivotal to the community. Definitely supported the project going forward. However, I think the operator is getting a fairly good financial position from us if we're subsidising a facility on their building that basically reduces their expenses to the amount that it does. If it was a situation where the childcare centre was putting in, so we didn't have a cash upfront cost to council, I'd be a lot more supportive of that going forward, because they're going to reap the benefit of whatever amount they put in. If they've got a 25-year lease, a $21,000 contribution instead of 10 wouldn't put any imposition onto other ratepayers, and would be a commercial decision. I think it would be beneficial if it's going to 25 years, $2,100, $21,000. I think the benefit's going to be more than $1,000 a year as a benefit. So I'm just thinking there might be another way we can find a way to make that happen for them, help us get the grant for us as well, without any further cost to us. So is there a possibility that we could look at doing without any further contribution from council to the childcare facility option?
Councillor Littner.
Can I throw out a happy compromise suggestion that they are willing to, the childcare centre are willing to make a contribution of 10 grand, which means that we would be making an additional contribution of 11 grand to apply for the grant. Could we approve this motion pending a discussion with the childcare centre that rather than them have to pay us any money, we take that entire amount, which is 21 grand, off what they owe us, what we owe them. Sorry, I'm hyper-fussing or something. Do you understand what I'm trying to get at? That they end up paying the full amount, but it's not coming out of their pocket per se, it's just being deducted off the balance that we owe them.
Yeah.
The rent.
The rent recognised as paid in advance.
Because it's all moot if we don't get the grant, it's going to benefit everyone if we do get the grant. And this way they're not dipping their hand in their pocket now, we are, but it all comes out in the wash, that they're picking up the full tab, but in proper words.
Is that a feasible work?
Look, I think in not wanting to preempt the result, but I know the operators would be open enough to have that discussion with us. So, you know, in the event that we're successful in being awarded the grant for both Maitland and childcare, we can enter negotiations with the operators to recognise not only their $10,000 contribution, but the remainder which will be taking off the recognition of their rent payment in advance. I'm happy to take that as another take.
That would certainly make my position a lot happier in that situation. It's the only cost to the direct ratepayers as a cost, but they get a benefit. Ratepayers get a benefit through the facility. I would support that.
I'm happy to do that.
That's it.
Councillor Scott?
Just to clarify that position, would the additional $11,000 be added on to the rent payable in advance from the childcare centre? I'm not quite sure how this payback's working.
Dan can translate for me.
Yeah, through there. So there is a credit there that the council agreed to, was around the $330,000 mark. And so each month, as the rent is due, the rent that will be paid to us reduces that balance, that credit balance. So what we're talking about is taking $21,000, reducing that further by $21,000, being the contribution of the childcare centre to it. So it brings us closer to a point in time where we're actually receiving cash back as part of this rental arrangement, and allows the community to benefit as Council Might put out before.
Do we need to add words to this recommendation?
If the council's happy for me to add words to that.
Well, I'm asking the CEO, do we need to add words to this recommendation?
Just through you, Mayor, did you move that, Councillor Dignan? I guess the mover needs to agree to an amendment, but
I don't think anybody's moved.
oh, sorry, wasn't sure.
Councillor Clerk.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Clerk moved it, did you? Yeah, so
I
I guess the mover need to make an amendment, but I would be prepared to support the motion if there isn't a further, as Councillor Meyer has suggested, there isn't a further cost to council if the childcare centre actually contribute their portion of the cost of their the panels, and then that and the battery. So then at least the benefit they will receive the benefit, but it's not an added cost for the ratepayers up front.
So, just give us a second.
Can I make a suggestion? That the recommendation, Deputy Mayor, if that's okay. The council endorses a grant application to the Community Energy Upgrades Fund Program Round 2 for solar battery systems on the Minlaton Council Office and Southern York Peninsula Community Childcare Centre, Minlaton, on the understanding that the $21,000 for the childcare is dealt with this way, is removed from the rent owing. Is that the wording?
Is deducted.
Daniel?
Is deducted from the
Rent allowance balance?
something like rent
credit balance or subsidy balance.
Rental credit balance?
Their rental credits with council. Credit balance with council.
We know what you mean.
Yeah, so just capturing it correctly and just through you, Mayor, and Councillor Clerk, and whoever, if they're happy with the recommendation is, as you read it, I won't do a word for word, it's on the battery, it's on the mainland, Southern York Peninsula Childcare Centre, Minlaton, with the costs, sorry, I've just lost it, with the contribution costs being $21,000 for the installation at the Minlaton Childcare Centre be deducted from the amount of recognised rent paid in advance.
Is that suitable to the mover?
I'll accept that.
Councillor Bittner?
Sorry to be pedantic, but that doesn't include, that's us making an overarching decision on behalf of the operator, not in consultation, presuming that they are happy to accept those terms. Does that make sense? Sorry.
So,
Could you just mention subject to?
Director? Subject to.
Subject to.
Councillor Clifford?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I was going to agree with that, just subject to agreement by committee, but I'd also just like at the start there where it says endorse a grant application, that reads as if we've seen the application. Can it be that we approve management to develop and submit an application?
Through you, Mayor, Councillor, I believe it would be almost exactly the same as the previous submission, albeit with the inclusion of the childcare centre. But happy to include that.
Councillor Clerk, are you happy with that inclusion? Okay,
So we're going to move on to second.
so we're going to, who was the seconder? Councillor Oil. All those in favour? Carried. Okay, we go to 23.4, financial report, for as of the 30th of April 2025. Dan, do you want to speak to this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to take questions on this one.
No questions? Mover?
Move the report.
Thank you, Councillor. Second by Councillor Connell. Those in favour? Carried. Okay, 23.5, March quarterly budget review. Somebody like to move that matter? Councillor Hoyle? We have a seconder. Councillor Murdoch? Those in favour? Carried. 24.1, assets and infrastructure services, Yorktown Street Tree Project update. Director, would you like to speak to that matter?
Good, Chair, no. Report speeches.
Thank you. Councillor Hoyle? Councillor Hoyle will move the motion. Seconded, we have a seconder. Councillor O'Connell? All those in favour?
Can I ask a question, please?
Certainly. Councillor Mark?
Thank you. I fully support the Yorktown Street Tree Project. I just wanted to clarify through you, Deputy Mayor. We had the fund for Charles Street put aside for the works that were going to happen there and also parking and so forth. We've had a recent presentation in relation to realigning the parking along the main thoroughfare in Yorktown. I understood that possibly the $60,000 was coming from another bucket of money. Has that changed, or was it originally always going to be from the Charles Street project?
through, Mr. Mayor, this is a change of repurposing those funds. So that $100,000 has sat in the budget for a number of years around the Charles Street purchase that didn't happen. The intention then was, the idea was, as PLEC comes about, there's some streetscaping required. Obviously, it was never enough to do the streetscaping. In a sense, we've had to pull that project out because the streetscaping component is so large and needs to be rescoped. So that $100,000 is sitting in the budget, rather than rolling that infinitely, it's rolled for a number of years, is to utilise some of those funds. The streetscaping part of a PLEC project needs to come back in through an LTFP assessment and be re-looked at. So yeah, it's, to answer your question briefly, yeah, it's a repurposing of those funds.
Can I ask a follow-up question then? We've got $100,000 there. We don't know when PLEC's going to happen, if it is going to happen, because of the complexities of the main street of Yorktown and so forth. Is this an opportunity? We've got a group of very enthusiastic people who wanted to see some improvements for the town of Yorktown, with the streetscaping of the trees and so forth. Could we use, if we've got that money there for that purpose, as part of this one project, do things like improve the stopping of people parking at the five-way intersection and so forth, and maybe bring some beautification in the main street as a joint project to this? Or is it best to keep that separate and worry about that at another time, and just worry about the tree project now?
I'm the finance manager, but I would say, thinking of it practically and other stuff, I think that elevates me, I would split the two. I think there's a lot more work required than that $40,000 will allow.
Thank you. We do, I just interrupted, sorry, Matt.
Councillor Hall, you move that matter to our second.
It's already
We have a second, Councillor O'Connell, those in favour? Carried. Okay, 25.1, application to note rescission of land management agreement, Bray Road, Port Victoria. Conrad, did you want to speak to that matter? Justin?
Just as a brief overview, thank you, Mayor. This is in relation to a land division that has been progressively releasing some small stages over the last sort of 15 years. There is what we refer to as, I guess, a parent development allotment, which is the bulk of the allotment. There's another 4 residential allotments that they are intending on releasing. Ordinarily, the process here, where there is a land management agreement in place, would be to lift the land management agreement from the development lot and then replace it on the new allotments and what remains of the large allotment. This land management agreement was last looked at, it's in the sort of details of the report, but approximately 4 or 5 years ago, when the last stage was released. Councillors at the time, I guess, questioned the community benefit of the LMA, which looks effectively to put further development controls on those allotments. Following that, there was some discussion with the developer, and it was, I guess, indicated that that was the feedback and wouldn't possibly happen in the future, and a rescission may need to be on the cards. I guess we're at that stage now where the developer is looking to release the next 4 allotments. Staff are certainly suggesting that this is an additional layer of, I guess, planning policy that is not required, and any development that's proposed on these allotments can be adequately addressed by the planning and design code. So yeah, the process to remove that land management agreement with approval of council and the owners is to rescind it. So any questions, happy to take.
Councillor Hall?
Move the motion.
Second.
Councillor Meyer will second.
Thank you.
Those in favour? Carried. Now we go to 25.2, land management agreement, request waiver, 8 Mills Gully Road, Stansbury. You want to speak to that, Justin?
Happy to take any questions, but councillors might recall this one has come to council before in a very, very similar format in regards to wall height for the shed. There was an error in construction by the shed company, which has resulted in the shed being 45 centimetres higher at one end than anticipated. There's some pretty clear photographs that show the constructed shed, and which I would recommend is quite minimal change, but happily again for councillors to ask any questions.
Councillor Bittner.
I'm happy to move, comment looks made.
Councillor Mitchell moving. Councillor O'Connell will second that. Those in favour? Carried. Okay, we go to 25.3 is the Peninsula Midland Regional Plan Council submission. Director, do you want to speak to that matter?
Yes, just briefly, just to explain to, I guess, the gallery and councillors that the regional plan is required under the PDI Act, so the Planning Development and Infrastructure Act. It's been undertaken by the state. It's been under consultation for the last couple of months. It's the level of policy that sits above the planning and design code that, I guess, guides and advises future code amendments. It doesn't in itself change any of the code itself or planning zones, but I guess it guides any future changes to zoning and infrastructure throughout not just our council area but the Mid-North as well. So we've collated feedback from staff and we've got from councillors and have had to submit that. The due date was on the 7th of May. We've submitted it on the basis that any change to that submission from tonight will be sent back to the Commission.
Thank you. Any questions for the Director? Do we have a movement? Councillor Myers, seconded by Councillor Hoyle. Those in favour? Carried. Okay, so we move to confidential matters. So general business. We have any general business? Councillor Myers.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Apologies on this last meeting, I was asked this at the last meeting. In December, in relation to recording meetings, it was said that it would be coming to a workshop to discuss further in relation to keeping them as records of council. I think you may have brought it up, Deputy Mayor, about the having records or something, and staff talked about it. So that was December. Have we, can we please be updated as to whether we're going to have a workshop in relation to compiling that process?
Through the Mayor, to answer Councillor Myers' question, yes it is. It hasn't been scheduled as yet, but it's definitely on the plan.
Excellent. So do note that the recordings have been put up online already at the moment, so I think it's probably better if we do have our own official record going forward. So thank you very much. That's all I have to ask.
Thank you. So any other general business? Councillor Scott?
Yes, just to, thank you, Mr Mayor, just to clarify Mr Colin Daly's presentation, we're going to include the photograph that was presented, but Mr Daly would also like his notes recorded. I'm not sure whether there was notes taken by the minute taken of his presentation, but otherwise he'd be happy to provide a summary, like a dot point summary of his points put forward to be included in the minutes.
Through the Mayor, if Mr Daly could provide those notes and with a resolution of council have them included in the minutes, so can't see that.
Somebody like to move that those, Mr Davis notes be included. Councillor Hall, seconded by Councillor Murdoch. All those in favour? Carried. Okay, so we do get to keep it confidential now. I'm going to ask the gallery